The shop bell rang at 6:04 in the morning. Riley March did not look up. She was mid-cut on a shoulder joint, and the angle mattered. She finished it, clean through the cartilage, one motion, before she set the cleaver down and turned. 3 men in suits, then a 4th in the doorway, not quite entering. The way men entered rooms when they were accustomed to rooms rearranging themselves around them. Lucian Riva. She had seen his photograph. She knew the shape of his family. She also knew that Garrick Sloan, who managed the Riva collection in the Riverside district, had been raising fees for 4 months without Riva authorization. She knew this because she had the receipts, and the receipts did not lie, and she had been waiting for a moment to say so to someone with the authority to hear it. She had not expected the moment to walk in before 7 a.m. Garrick came in behind Lucian. He put a document on the counter. "Shop closes today," he said. "Family business." Riley looked at the document, a property acquisition notice stamped with the Riva seal. She had been half expecting this for 3 weeks. She looked at Lucian. He looked at the shop, the way men looked at things they intended to repurpose, noting the structure, not the use. "I'm told this location has become inefficient." "Then whoever told you that," Riley said, "has been stealing from you." The room went quiet. Garrick stepped forward, careful. Riley picked up the cleaver, not as a threat. She turned it over once and set it in its place on the magnetic strip above the block. The motion of someone returning a tool to where it lived, deliberate, unhurried. Then she reached under the counter with 1 foot and pulled out the chair she kept there. The old wooden chair her father had used for customers who needed to sit down to talk about money, and pushed it forward across the concrete floor until it sat in front of the butcher block. "Sit down, Don Riva." Garrick laughed. "You don't tell him where to sit. If he wants my shop," Riley said, "he can start by learning what it costs to keep his territory alive." Lucian looked at the chair. He looked at her. He looked at the shop, the receipts pinned to the board, the hand-lettered sign that read "Pay Friday if you have to," "Eat today," the row of hooks, the fogged display case, the ledger open on the end of the counter. He sat down. Riley reached under the counter and brought up a second book. Older. The spine was cracked, and the cover had a watermark where it had been stored against something cold for years. She set it on the counter between them. "Your ledgers say this street pays $12,000 a month in protection." She opened it to a marked page. "It pays $27. The difference isn't loss." She looked at Garrick. "It's theft." She turned to the next page. "Your territory is not starving because the people here are weak, Don Riva. It's starving because your own men are eating it alive." 5 days earlier, March and Bone opened at 4:30 in the morning. There was a reason for this, and the reason was not ambition. The reason was that the Riverside district ran on schedules that polite business hours ignored. Delivery drivers finishing night routes, kitchen staff starting prep, dock workers changing shifts, elderly people who slept badly and needed to be outside before the cold settled into their joints. Riley's father had opened at 4:30. She had kept the hours. The white butcher coat pulled across Riley March's full figure whenever she reached for the high hooks, but she had stopped caring years ago. It held her knives, her pencil, and the receipts men like Garrick wished she had lost. The first hour was always the same. She portioned the day's cuts. She set aside the credit orders. the ones with names written in the ledger under Pay Friday, which sometimes meant Friday of this week, and sometimes meant a Friday further away than she cared to think about. She wrapped the soup bones for Father Mateo's kitchen. She noted what she had and what she needed and calculated whether the week's supply costs left any margin. They usually did, barely. This particular morning, Mina Chen from the bakery next door arrived at 5:15, which was not usual. Mina was 41 and had the precise, controlled movements of someone who had learned to make herself unobtrusive in rooms where she felt unsafe. She stood inside the door and waited for Riley to finish wrapping before she said anything. "Garrick sent someone yesterday. The surcharge is going up again." Riley set the package on the stack. "By how much?" 40%, plus a cold root fee I've never heard of. Mina held out a slip of paper. "He said if I don't sign by Friday, my flour delivery gets rerouted." Riley looked at the slip. It was handwritten, not a Riva form, not an official notice, just a number on a piece of paper with Garrick's initials. "Does this match anything in the Riva fee schedule?" "I don't have a copy of the Riva fee schedule." "I do," Riley said. "My father had one. The cold root fee doesn't exist." Mina looked at her. The look had a question in it that she didn't quite ask. Riley said, "Don't sign it yet." She had been keeping 2 sets of receipts for 11 months. Not because she had planned for this moment. Because she was a butcher's daughter who had grown up watching her father track every cent the shop moved. And when the surcharges started arriving, small at first, then larger, then routine, she had started keeping them the way she kept everything. In a second column, with a date, cross-referenced against the official fee schedule her father had copied out by hand the year he died. Henry March had been careful. He had also been unlucky. His copy of the dual ledger, his evidence of what Garrick was doing, was in the freezer. Not in the main cold room. In the lining of the back wall, behind a panel that looked like insulation and was, except for the 12 inches at the bottom, where Henry had cut out the original foam and replaced it with a folded oilskin wrap. Riley had found it 3 months after he died, when a freezer seal failed, and she had pulled the panel to check the wiring behind it. She had read it once. She had replaced it. She had understood, reading it, why her father was dead. She had also understood that a ledger without a witness was just paper. She had spent the time since making sure she was not the only one who knew. Lucian Riva spent his mornings reviewing revenue maps. Lucian's father had lost a southern block once because he mistook shrinking revenue for disloyalty and punished the businesses instead of the man stealing from them. Lucian had promised himself, young enough that the promise still felt like armor, that he would never inherit a map without checking its numbers. He had not yet learned that numbers could be made to lie when the people behind them were too afraid to speak. The Riverside district was showing a decline for the 7th consecutive month. Garrick's reports attributed this to shrinking business base, difficulty in collections from legacy accounts, and increased overhead from expanded patrol routes. The numbers were, on their face, plausible. Riverside was an old neighborhood. The businesses there were small. Supply chains were not efficient at that scale. Lucian read the numbers and believed the shape of the problem, if not yet its cause. He went to look at the territory himself. He did not tell Garrick. He walked the Riverside district on a Tuesday morning in a coat that was good but not conspicuous. and what he saw did not match the profile of a district in economic decline. March and Bone was busy, not lucrative, he could see that from the street, but busy in the particular way of a place that had made itself necessary. A woman in her 60s counting coins for a pork shoulder, Riley making change and saying something that made her laugh. A driver dropping cash and picking up a foil-wrapped package without stopping. Two teenagers carrying a box toward the church on the corner. He stood outside for longer than he intended. Riley came out to bring in the morning delivery crates and stopped when she saw him. He was not in the profile of the Riverside district. She knew him in approximately 3 seconds. "You walk like a man used to people moving before he reaches them," she said, "and you talk like a woman who forgets who owns the street." She picked up a crate. "No. I remember exactly who pays for it." She went back inside. He stood there a moment longer, then followed. The shop smelled like cold iron and salt, and something underneath that was harder to name. Something that had to do with the accumulation of small transactions, the smell of a place that had been used for the same honest purpose for a long time. He looked at the board of pinned receipts, the ledger on the counter, the list of names on the credit page, visible from where he stood. "You keep strange books for a butcher," he said. "I keep the books the neighborhood needs kept. Riva Protection covers this street. Riva Protection covers this street," Riley said. "Garrick's surcharges cover Garrick." She said it the way she said everything, without heat, without emphasis, the way a person stated a fact they had been sitting with long enough that it no longer required emotional support. Lucian looked at her. "What surcharges?" "The ones that aren't in the fee schedule." She went back to the block. Cold route, street maintenance, extended hours, visibility contribution. None of them Riva, all of them Garrick. She looked up. "I have receipts." He left without answering. But he came back the next morning, and the morning after that. The freezer lining gave on a Wednesday night. Riley was doing end-of-day inventory when the back panel shifted. The seal at the bottom had gone soft, and the weight of the wrap inside was pulling it free. She repacked it and resealed the edge with cold tape, and while she had the panel out, she checked the oilskin. Everything her father had documented was there. 2 columns. Official Riva fees on the left, annotated in blue. Garrick's actual collections on the right, in a different ink, red, she supposed because Henry March had been a practical man, and red meant stop. The gap between them ran to more than $100,000 over 32 months. At the bottom of the last page, in her father's handwriting, a name, Garrick Sloan, double ledger confirmed, route ticket attached. Attached to the back page, with a rusted paperclip, was a delivery ticket. She looked at it. The route was one she recognized, a cold storage run that had gone wrong the night her father died. The ticket was dated that night. The driver's signature was for a man who had been dead for 6 months before the ticket was supposedly signed. Garrick used dead men as paperwork. She thought about this for a long time, sitting on the floor of the cold room with the oilskin on her knees and the freezer running its low mechanical hum around her. Then she went to find Oscar Bell. Oscar was 62 and had driven for March and Bone since before Riley was born. He had taken fewer runs in the years since Henry died, citing bad knees, which Riley understood was not entirely true. He met her at the back of the shop the next morning, before open. She showed him the ticket. He looked at it for a long time. "I knew there was a second vehicle that night," he said. "Different route. Used the alley off Crail Street, which isn't on any official collection route." He folded his hands around his coffee. "The driver was someone I didn't recognize. Young. He had a Riva jacket, but I'd never seen him at any collection point." "Did you report it? To who?" He looked at her. "Garrick ran the night routes. I reported to Garrick. You didn't tell me. You were 26, and you'd just lost your father, and I had a son making deliveries for the same man I was looking at." He set down the coffee. "I kept the ticket because I didn't know what else to do with it." Riley held out her hand. He gave it to her. She walked next door to the bakery. Mina was already at the proofing station, but she stopped when Riley came through the side door. "I need you to be a witness," Riley said. "Not yet. Probably in a few days. I need to know if you will." Mina's hands went still on the dough. "I have children," she said. "Garrick knows which school." Riley didn't push. She knew what it cost to say that. "Then don't speak until I can make speaking safer than silence," she said. "I'm working on that part." By Friday, Lucian had been in the neighborhood 4 times that week, alone, in a coat that was good but not conspicuous. Riley had not explained this to herself in any particular way. She had simply noted it, the way she noted things that mattered without knowing yet how. Friday morning, he came differently. He came with Garrick, and Garrick brought the acquisition notice. It went the way it had to go, the notice on the counter, the line about the shop being inefficient. Riley's answer about who was really stealing. Garrick's careful. The cleaver returned to its strip. The chair pulled out from under the counter, with her foot, the same motion as always, deliberate and unhurried. "Sit down, Don Riva." He sat. And Riley finally had the man with the authority to fix this sitting in the chair her father had kept for people who needed to talk about money. She poured him coffee, the shop's coffee, dark and unfussy, and set it on the counter. This time she did not summarize. She let him read. "Show me the surcharge records," he said. She showed him. She had organized them by shop, by month, by fee category. 17 businesses, 11 months of documentation. The official Riva fee schedule beside each one, showing what was authorized and what was invented. The gap, totaled on the last page, $231,000. Lucian did not speak. He turned pages. Riley let him read. She went back to work. Morning prep, portioning, wrapping, because the best thing she had learned from her father was that silence did not need to be filled, and that people thought more clearly when they were not being watched. When he was done, he said, "Why not bring this to me before?" Riley looked up. "Men like you don't usually arrive to listen. They arrive to collect." He absorbed this. "The report I received said this district was underperforming." "The report you received was written by the man collecting the extra $200,000. She set down the wrapping paper. "He's not underperforming. He's profitable, just not to you." Lucian looked out the window at the street. "Garrick has run this district for 9 years. I know. My father spent 2 of those years documenting his second ledger." She kept her voice even. "He died before he could give it to anyone who outranked Garrick." The shop was quiet, except for the compressor in the cold room and the sound of the street outside. Lucian said, "I want to verify the numbers." "Good," Riley said. "I want you to." That afternoon, Garrick cut the routes. March and Bone's morning delivery was rerouted. The supplier called Riley to say there had been a scheduling conflict and her run was delayed by 48 hours, which was not possible given that the scheduling conflict had been created 18 minutes ago. Mina's flour delivery was pulled. The soup kitchen's weekly bone pickup was suddenly not on any active route. Riley had expected something like this. She had also expected the timing, which meant she had spent Thursday evening making calls. The electrician who had been on a payment plan for 18 months. The retired driver who still had a van. 2 restaurant owners who received their weekly meat order on credit. The day laborers who unloaded the delivery dock 3 mornings a week. Father Mateo, who had a van of his own and 16 years of understanding that neighborhoods ran on informal systems. The formal economy preferred not to notice. And Oscar, who knew more back routes than anyone in the district and whose son she was quietly working on. She did not call them to fight. She called them to fill a gap. By the next morning, the delivery network was running on 7 different vehicles and 4 informal agreements, none of which ran through Garrick's route system. Lucian's security man found her at the shop that evening. He looked at the improvised system, the whiteboard with pickup times, the coolers staged in the alley, the roster of volunteers, and for the first time since Riley had met any of them, he didn't call her a butcher woman. He called Lucian. Lucian came back that evening. He stood in the shop after close, looking at the butcher paper Riley had laid on the counter, the neighborhood map she had been building for months, not in streets and routes but in connections, who relied on whom, who owed whom, what each business needed to survive a week, a month, a bad winter, where the informal credit lines ran, which families were eating on bones from March and Bone and had been for years. Bakery uses our fat for pastry, she said, indicating the line between the two. Soup kitchen runs on bones and offcuts. The diner takes morning sausage at wholesale. The night shift drivers stop here because it's the only place open at 4:30 that isn't a gas station. She traced the lines. 3 of Garrick's regular guards eat lunch here on Thursdays. I know their wives' names. 2 of them have been putting off dental work because the surcharges cut into what they send home. Lucian was looking at the map without speaking. You call this territory, Riley said. I call it circulation. Cut one artery and the whole body goes cold. Lucian looked at her hands on the butcher paper, scarred, steady, flour dust and ledger ink caught near one knuckle, and understood, with an irritation that felt too close to admiration, that she had been holding his district together while his men were cutting it apart. He said, Garrick's men were seen behind your alley last night. I know. Word got back to me before they got back to him. Because the man who did my electrical work in 2019 saw them looking at the breaker box. And he called the 2 mechanics who share the unit next door. And then Father Mateo happened to be walking past with 4 people from the soup kitchen. She paused. Nobody swung anything. They just stood there until Garrick's men decided it wasn't worth the conversation. Not yet. Lucian looked at her. You organized that. I've been part of this neighborhood for 32 years. I didn't organize anything. I've just never made people feel like they owed me more than they could pay. He was quiet for a moment. Your father believed the same thing. It was not a question. He had been doing the math. He believed if you fed people long enough, Riley said, one day they would be brave enough to tell the truth. And were they? She folded the map along a crease. Not while Garrick was still the one deciding what happened if they did. She found Oscar the next morning and told him it was time. He came to the shop at noon, after the rush, and sat in the chair where Lucian sat and put the delivery ticket on the counter. The second vehicle that night, he said. I wrote down the plate. I still have it. He looked at Riley. I kept it because your father asked me to keep the things he couldn't keep himself. He said if anything happened, the shop would know what to do with them. Riley looked at the ticket. At her father's handwriting in the corner, 2 numbers, a date, initials. She did not let herself feel it until she was alone in the cold room with the compressor running. Then she allowed herself 3 minutes. Then she went back to work. 2 nights before the meeting, Garrick made his final move. He sent 4 men to the shop at 2 in the morning with instructions to cut the power to the freezer unit. It was a targeted choice, not fire, not vandalism, nothing the police would pursue aggressively. Just a spoiled inventory and a financial loss large enough to end the shop for good. They got as far as the alley behind March and Bone. What they found was Oscar Bell's delivery van parked across the rear access, the electrician's apprentice on the fire escape with a flashlight and a phone, a retired dock worker sitting on a crate drinking coffee, and through the ground floor window, visible from the alley, Riley March at the butcher block in the light, working, not waiting, working, as if she had not bothered to acknowledge the possibility of a different outcome. One of Garrick's men recognized the dock worker from a family connection. He stood in the alley for a moment, then said something to the others. They left. Lucian heard about this before morning. His security man told him, somewhat flatly, that the neighborhood had simply been there. Lucian came to the shop at opening. Riley was in the middle of the morning rush and did not stop working, but she said, "One of your guards, the one who usually comes Thursday. His wife had a baby last month. He hasn't been in." Lucian looked at her. "I'm saying send him." She wrapped a package without looking up. "Whole chicken, soup bones, whatever he wants. Tell him it's on the shop until he's back on Thursday's schedule." Lucian said nothing for a moment. "Then you know the names." "I know the names," Riley said. "That's the job." He stood at the counter after the other customers had been served. The shop was briefly quiet. He looked at the wall behind her, the receipts, the delivery schedule, the hand-drawn map, the sign. "Garrick has been running a parallel system for 9 years," he said. "I didn't know. I know you didn't. That is not a small thing to miss." "No," Riley said. "It isn't." She looked at him directly. "But you sat down when I asked you to. That's something most men in your position don't do." He held her gaze for a moment. "I'm going to need the ledgers," he said. "All of them. The second one, too." "I know," Riley said. "That's why I waited until you came to ask. March and Bone, after close." The shop felt different with 10 people in it. Not crowded, the space was large enough, but weighted. Lucian at the counter in the customer's chair. Silas Riva beside him, a man Riley's father had described once as the person who knew where all the numbers lived. Garrick at the far end, standing, the only person in the room who had not chosen to be there. On the other side of the butcher block, Riley, Mina, Oscar, Father Mateo, and 3 other shop owners whose names were in the ledger and who had asked quietly to be present. Outside the front window, not crowded, not dramatic, just there, a dozen people from the neighborhood. Word had gone around in the way word went around when something was about to be decided that everyone had a stake in. Riley put the ledgers on the butcher block. Both of them. She put the receipt file beside it. Organized by date, by shop, by category. She put the delivery ticket at the top. Then she said, looking at Lucian and not at Garrick, "I'm not asking you to destroy your protection system. I'm asking you to run the one you're supposed to be running." She laid out the terms, point by point. 1. All surcharges not in the official Riva fee schedule cancelled and documented. 2. Shops that had overpaid in the last 12 months would receive a credit applied against future fees. 3. Fake debt notes, she had documentation of 9, would be voided with written confirmation from Lucian's office. 4. The official protection fee schedule would be posted and signed in every Riva-covered shop in the district. 5. Any collection outside the posted schedule would constitute breach of terms, documented with the Riva Senior Council, actionable by the businesses themselves. 6. A neighborhood emergency fund, seeded from Garrick's seized assets, held by a neutral party. She suggested Father Matteo and Silas together for businesses damaged by protection violations. 7. March and Bone would serve as a neutral receipt point. 1 copy of every collection to Riley, 1 to Riva. Any gap between them reported to Silas directly. Garrick said, "She's a butcher woman drawing lines on butcher paper. This isn't a negotiation." "Then it's a testimony," Riley said. She looked at Mina. Mina's hands were steady. They had not been steady the first time Riley asked her to witness. Something had changed in the interval, not bravery exactly. More like the particular resolution of a person who has decided that the cost of speaking is lower than the cost of what happens if they don't. She put her receipt on the counter. 8 months, she said. 2 payments a month, 1 to Riva, 1 to Garrick. He told me the second one was for accelerated protection during peak season. Lucian looked at Garrick. Garrick said, "She misunderstood the billing structure." Silas, who had been quiet, pulled a ledger from his case and opened it. He ran his finger down a column. He looked at the gap between Garrick's reported collections and the amounts Garrick had submitted to Riva. He said to Lucian quietly, "It matches." The room was very quiet. Garrick straightened. He reached into his jacket and put a receipt on the counter. Henry March's signature at the bottom, dated 9 years back, authorizing what Garrick called an accelerated protection surcharge structure. Her father signed off on this, he said, long before he ever objected to anything. Riley looked at it once. My father signed in blue ink for shop records and black ink for Riva filings. He kept it that way for 14 years, so no one could ever do exactly what you just did. She turned the page towards Silas. That signature is red. Silas checked the old fee schedule against the ink, then went very still. He said nothing. He didn't need to. Riley reached under the counter and put the oilskin wrap on the block. She unfolded it carefully, the way her father had folded it. Outer edge first, then the 2 sides, then the bottom flap, so the paper inside lay flat without pressure marks. She put the dual ledger on the counter, and the delivery ticket with the dead man's signature, and the plate number in her father's handwriting. Henry March, she said, spent 2 years documenting what Garrick was doing. He died in a delivery route accident the night he planned to bring this to Don Riva Sr. She looked at Lucian. The vehicle that followed his route that night used a shell route registered to a company that Silas can probably identify. Silas was already turning pages. He found the renewal filing in under a minute, and the account that had paid it. Garrick's district account, he said, 2 weeks before Henry died. Lucian looked at the ticket. He looked at Garrick. Garrick had gone very still. "My father," Riley said, "died trying to tell your family that its own men were stealing from it. I am telling you now, while everyone here is still alive enough to sign." Lucian signed the renegotiated territory terms on the butcher block in March and Bone at 10:47 in the evening. He signed with Riley's pen, a stub of a thing, flat from years of ledger work, the kind of pen that lived in an apron pocket. He said, "Riva protection will no longer be collected in the dark." Silas notarized the signatures. Garrick was walked out by 2 men who had arrived quietly during the testimony and had stood near the back in the particular way of men who were there to make a specific thing happen at a specific time. He did not make a scene. He was, in the end, a man who had built his power on other people's silence, and silence had run out. The people outside the window watched him go. Riley signed her line. Riley March, neighborhood ledger holder. She capped the pen and put it back in her apron pocket. 1 month later, the surcharges were gone. Mina paid 1 line item on the 1st of the month and kept a copy of the receipt in a frame beside the register, which she told Riley was not sentiment but documentation. Riley said, "Both." Mina almost smiled. The freezer at March and Bone had been replaced, a commercial unit, newer than anything the shop had ever owned. The funds had come from Garrick's seized operational accounts. Lucian had, without comment, added enough to cover installation and 2 years of service. Father Mateo's soup kitchen had enough bones for winter. He told Riley this in the particular tone of a man who had not been sure that would be true as recently as 6 weeks ago. Oscar's son had left Garrick's runner operation. He was doing delivery work for 3 riverside businesses, legitimate routes, and had been in the shop twice with his father, which Riley counted as a reasonable outcome. The Riva guards came on Thursdays. They paid. The one with the new baby had brought a photograph, which he held up briefly without explanation before folding it back into his wallet. Lucian came at 7, an hour after close, on a Tuesday in early December. He came alone, which was still unusual enough to be noticeable. Riley was breaking down the last of the day's display. He came in and stood on the customer side of the counter, which he always did. He had never once moved to come around it, which she had noticed without making anything of it. He put a folded map on the counter. She finished what she was doing, wiped her hands, and unfolded it. It was the Riverside district, but not the version she had seen in Riva files. The one made of streets and routes and revenue zones, the map of a territory understood as a surface to be owned. This one had all of that, and also the shop names annotated, the fee schedule posted by location, emergency contacts, food distribution points, the soft businesses marked with a different notation, not red for threat, but something more careful, indicating places that needed particular attention to stay intact. The lines between the shops were drawn, connecting them the way her butcher paper map had connected them. "I had it redrawn," Lucian said. "By whom? By people who eat here." Riley looked at the map for a long moment. There was her shop at the center of the Riverside district, where it had always been. But on this version of the map, it was labeled not as a collection point or a commercial unit or a logistics asset. It was labeled March and Bone, Neighborhood Anchor. She folded the map along its creases and looked at him. He reached into his coat and set a key on the counter, not a shop key. A smaller one, the kind for a filing cabinet or a lockbox. "Riva Counting Office," he said. "If my men collect from this neighborhood, you see the receipts first." "That sounds like work." "It is." She looked at the key. "And what do I get?" "The right to tell me when I'm wrong before the street has to bleed to prove it." She almost smiled. It was close enough that he seemed to notice. "Dinner," he said. She looked at him. He recalibrated. "Would you have dinner with me, Riley?" It was not quite a question yet, but it was no longer an order either, which was progress. "You trying to buy loyalty, Don Riva?" "No," he said. "I'm asking the woman who made me renegotiate a territory whether she'll let me buy one meal. You pay full price." "I would not insult you with anything else." She untied her apron. "Give me 10 minutes," she said. Lucian Riva had arrived at March and Bone, believing territory was something a man owned when enough people feared his name. Riley March had taught him that territory was something people kept alive before the powerful arrived to collect from it. The shop had never been inefficient. It had been feeding the very street his men were bleeding. And when the Don finally sat down at her counter and read the ledger she put in front of him, he learned what the Riverside district had always known. Protection is not the money you take from people. It is the reason they are still there when morning comes. If a Mafia boss came to take the one place keeping your neighborhood alive, would you fight him with a weapon, or make him read every receipt his own men tried to hide? Tell me in the comments. When did you first realize Riley's butcher shop was the real heart of the territory? Subscribe to Underworld Desire for more stories about underestimated women who understand power better than the men who arrive to collect it.